copyright, the digital music marketplace and copyright. I'll be presenting. I've got a few slides that I will be presenting. So if you can just allow me to share the slides. I hope you can all see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can see your screen.
Okay, thank you so much. So I will be talking about the digital music marketplace and copyright. So the topics that we will cover today is the digital marketplace. I have actually segmented them into three: digital marketplace, then I will talk about licensing, and then I will talk about the contracts. So in terms of the digital marketplace, I will start with this diagram, which most of you, if you are in the music industry, would be very familiar with. The diagram actually shows the IFPI report, a summary of the IFPI report, which shows the move that has happened from physical, which is in red, to streaming, which is in blue, if you look right at the end. And it is interesting that we have got a person like Grace who is in fashion design, because as you will see as we discuss that music is very much related to almost every part of the business. And you can see right at the top of from 2010, you can see sync there, which was fairly stable for the first 4 years, for the first 5, 6 years, and then started to have a steady increase, which is also a very important part of the music business, which most people do not actually utilize in terms of when they are looking to take up a career in music. Most people look at secular music and do not really look at production music. And I'm apparently attending a production music workshops right now, where the discussions are on how production music can be used for synchronization and all that. So I think as a fashion designer, if you are to do your adverts and all that, you need to work very closely with people that do production music, and it is part of the music which is currently not very popular on the continent. And this is why in most of the international programs, we find there is mostly international music, because it's part of what we are not currently doing. But I'm just digressing here. But the main reason that I'm talking here is to just show how much music has evolved from the physical to streaming. As you will see in this slide now, streaming contributed 67% of the total global music revenue, and followed by downloads. And you realize that downloads have actually gone down. They used to be high around 20, between 2010 and 2015. But with the launch of streaming, streaming has basically taken over the music marketplace. And therefore, we need to really understand how streaming works and what is it that we can benefit from, who are the streaming platforms, what types of licenses do we need to get as artists and as musicians, what is it that you need to do, which platforms do you put your music on if you are to be able to benefit from that music. As legal practitioners, what is it that you can advise your clients in terms of where they need to put their music and how they can maximize the benefits from that music. So as you can see, just in the last year, streaming was what just happened? Just in the last year, streaming was 11.5% up compared to the previous year. This is global, but you shall see how it performed on the African continent. Sync was 22.3%. Sync is still a very small component of revenue, but when we look at the growth, it shows that it will be it's currently at 2.4% of the global revenues, but the increase but with which it is coming, it shows that it is actually becoming a very big business. And downloads were 11.7% down. So very few people are looking to own music, as most people are now looking at consumption as opposed to really owning the music. Because if you just consume the music, you can stream, change, and do whatever you would like to do most of the time, for as long as you've got your Wi-Fi, you've got your data, which we will also talk about. You can be able to stream the music, and you can have access to the over 100 million tracks that are available for consumption on streaming services. Now, online revenues alone, when we look at streaming, downloads, and sync and other forms of online revenue, was 73.1% of the global revenue just in the past year. And Africa alone had an increase of 34.7%. And no wonder why everybody has got their eyes on Africa. Now, one of the most worrying factors is that out of this 34.7%, over 32, about 32% increase in this revenue was in South Africa alone. But when you look at the popularity of the music locally, on the continent, and internationally, everyone would agree with me that Nigerian music is doing much more. So why do we have that difference where the revenue is more in South Africa, but most of the music that is going global is out of Nigeria? Of course, all the music is going global, but Nigeria is currently at the top. But in terms of revenue, why would then South Africa alone be driving that increase? And imagine if every other country on the continent, Kenya, for example, which used to also be doing quite well, and currently Tanzania, Ghana, if everybody was doing very well, obviously we would be looking at not only 34.7%, but much more. It means our revenues would be much higher, but we will also discuss, this course will provide what it is that needs to be done and what it is that one as a music business entrepreneur would need to do in order to be able to improve your earnings. So here are some of the factors that are currently affecting the digital consumption of music. The exploitation of music is because older age groups are now increasingly embracing audio streaming, and people are moving away from downloads. Obviously, CDs, like for example in South Africa, all the CDs manufacturing companies shut down, so you can't find a CD now. But in terms of downloads, the downloads are going down. Everybody is moving on to streaming. Older age people are now embracing streaming as well. You find everybody with their headphones on and streaming music when driving to and from work, when driving around. So this is one of the reasons why digital exploitation of music is going up and why streaming is 67%. And the majority of the music fans are now accessing music from the streaming services. Streaming services have launched all over the continent, and this has allowed people to be able to stream. We've got Deezer, YouTube, Spotify, Boomplay, and all the other streaming services, including other local streaming services that are trying to enter the business. And this has made the music available, and this is why it is now easier for everyone to be able to stream a song. A song is released today in South Africa, you can be able to access it immediately in Nigeria. And that is how easy accessibility of music has become. And this is also driving consumption. One of the challenges that we spoke about why South Africa has got more revenue and is driving the growth on the continent. Amongst the countries on the continent, South Africa has got the lesser exchange control restrictions in terms of the use of the credit card to stream on international platforms and all that. So exchange control restrictions are actually currently a hindrance to the growth of the music sector. So it is a sector where there is need for our governments to be able to really look at and say, how do they cooperate and how do they incorporate the need to grow the music industry marketplace while also protecting the economy in terms of what they want to do. But they can't be or just on one extreme and ignoring the other, because the unavailability of credit cards, the exchange control restrictions, um, and leading to the availability of mobile money, where telcos are now the ones that are providing the payment options. But in providing that payment options, they're eating into the revenues that are supposed to end up in the music industry, thereby reducing and also affecting the growth of the music industry. So it's an area that actually needs to be looked at right across the continent. And obviously, economic stability also plays a very key role in that. Where the economy is unstable and the inflation rate is high, the rate of the local currency is low compared to major international currencies. It also means that when actually converted, Nigeria might have a whole lot of streaming subscribers, more than any other country, including South Africa. But if you look at the value of the currency, that is what then affects the ultimate value that gets recorded when an international report like the FBI report is then processed. Then there is also a huge issue with copyright infringement, which leads to all forms of piracy and unlicensed streaming services. And I was speaking earlier about how the artist is supposed to behave in terms of where they put their music. As an artist, one needs to understand and know which platforms are legal platforms that are streaming and paying for the licenses. And if you just put your music on or in any platforms, your music could be streaming, could be popular, and but if it is not aggregated properly and it is not put on services that do respect copyright, the likelihood of getting that money is zero. So I know that most artists would say, I put my music there because I would like to be able to market my music and all that. But at the end of the day, you are not only doing it in order to just market that music. And after all, when your streaming is happening on some of those platforms that do not license, the streams might not be recorded properly. And when you would want to be signing a deal or entering into any licensing agreement, that information is not taken into consideration, because services that do not pay for copyright never report the usage. And if the usage is not reported, there is no record of how popular your music, even though your music is being downloaded and streamed from all those piracy services. And the other issue is also the issue of stream ripping, where even on normal streaming services, there are also people that are unscrupulous and will be just ripping off the audio from that. And that's a very difficult one to really control. So obviously, again, there is a need to collaborate firstly with the artists to understand and know where exactly to put your music. If you are a legal practitioner, to be able to tell your clients what it is, what are the legal, you need to know all the legal streaming platforms that do pay for music licenses, and then encourage your clients to be able to put their music on those platforms. And then the key players in the digital music space, obviously the record labels, as they've always been. We also have music publishers. We also have music streaming services, VOD services, online radio, and OTT. OTT is actually referred to as over the top. And please don't ask me why, because I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me, but that is exactly what it is called. So here they refer to TV platforms that are streaming the same program that you can see on a satellite TV on a multi-choice, for example, and then you can also stream it on your DSTV online. So they call that over the top. And then there's also, and that is the TV streaming that I'm talking about. So with record labels have always been very strong in terms of being a key player in the music industry sector. The change that has happened is the availability of many more independent record labels, and everyone is now able to access the market through the aggregators. For as long as you have got the ability to market your own music, to be able to plug your music and to make sure that it is listened to, the market is there and it's available for you. The only thing that you require is probably the financial muscle to be able to then market that music properly and make sure that it is playlisted and all that. The change that has happened with regards to the record labels is that record labels used to print the CDs, sell them to the music stores, and then they would report to publishers through CMOs in order to be able to pay for the reproduction rights of that music. So publishers would rely on the record labels to get the sales and then be able to then pay whoever would have composed, written, or produced the music. But now, when it comes to digital, record labels will go to, when they deliver the content to the music streaming services, they just deliver the content, get paid for the recording side. Now, publishers will now have to go directly and also negotiate a license. So when publishers do negotiate a license, it's either they do it directly or through the CMO. The change that has happened there is that traditionally everybody would have to go through a CMO in order to get the records of what would have been printed by the record labels. But now publishers can either go directly and license, or they can go through the CMO or any other player in the music industry sector which deals with that. And obviously, the music streaming services are now currently holding the key. And the other problem that is happening now is that the record labels and the big publishers, particularly the majors, are also buying stakes, shareholding within the streaming services. And that is a worrying factor for small players, in that one would wonder whether that will lead to absolute transparency in terms of what music is being playlisted and how that all goes about. VOD services have become a major revenue earner on the continent. We all know Netflix, Amazon, Disney Plus have launched on the continent and are actually doing very well. You'll be surprised that just after 3 years in operation, the VOD services are now the major revenue earners in terms of the streaming revenue. And this is where the synchronization revenue that I was talking about earlier then comes into play, because the music that is needed as production music into the movies, into the adverts and all that, it might be commercial music that we listen to every day, but in most cases they want music that have got a sound that actually creates a mood that you will be able to listen to. If it is going to be violent, you listen to the sound of that song. It tells you what to expect. You start to be, your heart starts beating, because now you are fearing as if you are actually within the movie. And when you actually look at it, it is driven by the music that is used. So production music becomes a very important component of the music business as we go on. Now we also have all the radio stations that are now operating online. So those are the key players in the music sector. Now we move on to the licensing, which is our second part. of this discussion. In terms of licensing, the major categories of rights is the record and the song. We already discussed how the record labels do license and leave all the money that belongs to publishers, which is the song composition of the revenue at the DSP. And now it requires everybody to have their metadata in order. You can, if you are just a songwriter, but you are not a performer, you can't rely on the record label to be able to keep that information for you. You need to have your own metadata with all the minimum requirements in the metadata to be able to claim. And if you are a singer-songwriter, you need to have all your metadata there. You do have an advantage when you have aggregated your music. Ask your aggregator to then give you that information. If you are a representative, a manager of a musician and all that, that is what you are supposed to be paid for, to make sure that the metadata for that client of yours is all in order and they're able to look at it. We have already spoken about the rights holders, which are the record labels and the publishers, but we can also have, so the reason why I didn't really separate the publisher and the individual composers is that if you are dealing with a publishing right and you license your own rights, what it means is that you are also a publisher. You are referred to as self-published. Now, in terms of the rights that we license the distribution of the music, which is done by the record label in most cases, and then the publishing, and then we also license for the neighboring rights. So traditionally, the neighboring rights and the distribution were done differently. At the moment, very few countries have separated the equitable remuneration from the actual distribution of the sound recording. We have got Netherlands, who recently introduced an equitable remuneration, which means the CMO there will start collecting equitable remuneration from the digital platforms. But the discussion now is whether or not they are going to take part of what the record labels were already collecting. In most countries at the moment, that separation is not there. I was looking at the Nigerian Copyright Act as well. I didn't see that separation. I could have missed it. So perhaps in the discussions we can look at that and see, and also from Kenya as well. I didn't see it as well. So we can look at it from that angle and see whether or not this is currently separated. And if it is separated, how best can it be collected? Because we have got neighboring rights societies, we have got author composer societies that are currently collecting, but we also have record labels that are collecting directly. And if you're an independent artist, your collections are through the aggregator, which in this case also acts as your distributor. In terms of collective management, it has also evolved, and in his introduction, Dr. Chinedu mentioned that Capasso evolved from a traditional mechanical rights society into a digital licensing hub. So basically what we did was to look at the current trends and said, how can we set up a CMO of the future, a CMO that will be able to change quickly, evolve and adapt to the situation, and look at how best we can be able to benefit our members across the country and across the continent. We deal with quite a lot of other CMOs as well, but basically a CMO is it's just a collective management organization, and its purpose is to make sure they collect and distribute on behalf of their members, depending on the mandate that they would have been given. Traditionally, as rights holders did not have options to give their rights to different collecting entities. Right now, rights holders, if you're a composer, you can ask your publisher to collect directly, because publishers now have what, especially depending on the amount of repertoire they control, they now have the ability to be able to collect directly from the digital platforms for as long as they have got the processing ability. Rights management entities, commonly referred to as RMEs, have also entered the collective management space. And what they do is they come and they say, you control your rights, you're not assigning them to us, but you give us the mandate, just like what some CMOs do. You give us the mandate, we have the technology, we have the relationships with the DSPs, we go and we license and we connect for you. So it gives members a wide range of options. But as a business manager, as a music business manager, you also need to understand all the dynamics and say, and also understand the different countries, different territories and dynamics so that you can be able to advise your clients correctly to say, if you are dealing in this kind of scenario, you either have to use a publisher, an RME, or a CMO directly. So it's a very interesting scenario, and for one to be able to do that, you need to understand exactly what each and every one of that organization does differently from the next organization, and the factors for consideration are legislation, exchange control, subscriptions, and the ability, the processing ability, which brings in an issue of fairness and transparency. In terms of legislation, when you are licensing, you need to understand the legislative nature of the area in which you are licensing. If you do understand that, then it makes it easy for you when you are negotiating, because these big tech companies will always come and tell you that you have to rely on the laws of the countries in which they are domiciled. But in the event of something going wrong, you are obviously going to have a problem. Firstly, you don't have the financial muscle to be able to engage lawyers in those countries because of weak exchange control regimes. Secondly, where you have got your own attorneys that you have on a retainer, whom you would know would be able to be economic in terms of your work, you won't be able to engage those, because even if you engage them, they will have to engage other lawyers in those countries. So you need to look at the legislation, make sure that when you're licensing, you understand the legislation, and then you can pick the best applicable legislation for the specific license. And then you also need to look at the exchange control regulations to say, if they say they are going to be paying in South African rand, in Naira or Kenyan shillings, what is the benefit to your members, and at what point does that get exchanged so that your members don't end up losing from the exchange control? Because, for example, if we are subscribing in rand, it goes into US dollars and then they convert back into rand. What is the loss that happens along the line? At what rate? You look at the date of the exchange rate to say, what was the date of consumption and what was the date of the subscription payment, and what exchange rate are you going to use so that it doesn't disadvantage your rights holders. And then in terms of subscriptions as well, the number of subscriptions will determine how much you are going to be licensing, and the amount of revenue that you get is dependent upon that. And as you might have seen on the IFPI global report, the majority of the streaming service revenues are coming from subscriptions, and then a small portion of that comes from the advertising revenue. And now it depends on how much of the advertising uptake is being taken in each and every country in order to be able to have an impact on the amount of revenue that we are then able to collect, that will be paid through to the streaming service. And it also depends on how many subscribers are actually on there. So you look at the minimums that you are supposed to apply in terms of where there is a free subscription, which is advertising driven. You need to be able to see whether that will be beneficial and determine how much your members will be getting if it is one other streaming service that has got a streaming platform, as compared to a free service which only pays you based on subscription. And then the processing ability is very critical. digital sales reports come in trillions of transactions. So you need very fast and efficient processing ability to be able to process those reports. Now, for you to be able to process those reports, you need the metadata that we spoke about earlier. So it's a matter of matching your own database. If you are a CMO, a publisher, or an RME, you match your own database depending on the repertoire that you received from your members to the digital sales report, and then you are able to link the ISRC codes and the ISWC codes that do match, and then you can also do some manual intervention, which should be very minimal in order to be able to process. And then the issue of fairness, I think I did allude to the influence that some big rights holders have on the streaming services. You might have read the Music Business Worldwide sometime towards the end of September, where there was an agreement between Deezer and Universal Music Group, where they are classifying certain types of music as noisy music, and it will be removed from the Deezer platform and replaced by Deezer Music. And obviously, probably Deezer is going to be using AI to be able to produce that music. But the issue of classifying other music as noise music takes us back to the old era where the big record companies were in charge of music recording, and they wouldn't record certain genres of music and thereby suppressing certain cultures because they would say that music will not sell and so forth and so on. So you probably need to just look at that agreement between Deezer and Universal to really understand it, and then you can look back at the history of the evolution of music, because right now, as independent artists, you are able to record your music and distribute it. Nobody is worried about the quality other than yourself, because you know that if your quality is not that good, then you won't be able to sell. So the quality is determined by you, but it doesn't affect the ability to then put the music on a digital platform. So it would seem we might be going there. So that is the issue of transparency, to say, how do you then classify that? Who makes that decision? And if you are a small rights holder, what influence will you have? And then in terms of the process reports, we also need to have the fairness of being able to see and be able to audit and see how much of your music was streamed where and when, and how much is the amount that will be paid per stream in which particular period, in which particular reporting period, and is it the amount that everyone else was being paid. And then now we move to the main provisions of the contract. So what you just need to do, you look at the ownership and say who owns the copyright and who owns the intellectual property. And the intellectual property includes a whole lot of things, including merchandise. So you need to say, when you sign an agreement, be it with a publisher, a record label, a CMO, an RME, you look at who owns that copyright. Are you assigning it? If you are signing, if you have done a song that will be used as in a movie, are you giving them that song? Are you being commissioned to write that song? You get a once-off payment and you don't own that song? Or are you looking to get royalties, which is risky? In the event that the movie does well, then you get paid depending on the amount of money that it makes, or you just want to get a once-off payment and then you walk away. So those are some of the things that you need to consider in a contract. And then in terms of remuneration, you look at whether or not you get the advance, how much are you worth in terms of the advance, what are the determinations of that advance. All the information is available on the streaming platforms. We spoke about the illegal streaming platforms. When you are now negotiating an advance, the advance is determined based on the legal streaming platforms. Anything that is seen on that could be on the illegal streaming platforms will not be able to help you in terms of negotiating the advance, negotiating the terms of the agreement, because In negotiating the terms of the agreement, you also need to have a very strong negotiating power, which comes from the ability of your music to reach the audience, the popularity, and all that. And then you also look at, in terms of the remuneration, are you signing an agreement for performance royalties, or is it for mechanical royalties, or is it for both, or are you giving away both rights? So those are some of the things that you need to look at. And then in terms of the duration, you need to look at the term of the contract. What happens when the term expires? It is a rolling renewal. What notice period do you need to give in order to make sure that it doesn't go over? Or do you just, or is it a fixed term contract whereby when it expires, it is expired? So you also need to be very careful when looking at the duration and then the termination of the rights. Obviously, you look at the term. When do you terminate? What is the termination notice? And what do you need to do in order to be able to terminate it when you want to? And then there's also the issue of dispute resolution. What form of dispute resolution do you want to have? Is it a mediation, arbitration? What is the jurisdiction? Which governing law are you going to be using? You need to be very careful of the small print on this, because otherwise you can sign an agreement which you will never be able to enforce. And then who controls the creatives that you have done? Who controls the art, and who controls who approves the rights? Say, for example, if it is a song that you've signed to a CMO, a publisher, or an RME, when somebody wants to use it in an advert, in a movie, and all that, who is going to approve those rights? Do you give them the ability to approve the rights, or if you negotiate on your own, you will also be able to approve those rights? You need to be very clear on that. And then in terms of the distribution and promotion, which channels are you signing up for the music to be distributed? Is it all streaming services? Is it all streaming services and telcos for ringback tones, or is it just the streaming services, or is it just the telcos? So you need to be able to understand all those distribution channels. And then in terms of the marketing and promotion, are you going to be doing your own marketing and promotion? Are they supposed to be marketing your music? Obviously, it comes with different rates, because any additional work that you ask them to do for you, they can charge you for. If you have got the ability to do it, then you look at the cost benefit analysis of you doing it as opposed to giving it to who you are signing it to. And then obviously you need to have an indemnity clause in any agreement. And then an option to add additional albums. Do you want that option to be there? And what are the terms of that option? Do you have an option not to, do you have an option to come out of the agreement before reaching the number of albums that you've agreed? You need to have all that information. And then in terms of the recoupment of those advances that were given up there, what are the terms of the recoupment? How long does it take? Do they have to recoup all the amount? If they don't recoup the entire amount, but you've reached the number of albums, what happens? Are you going to be able to get your rights back before you finish recouping? What amount are you supposed to pay in order to pay yourself out of that specific contract? So these are some of the main provisions of a contract within the music space. And then in conclusion, I just say here, music is the backbone of African culture. The United Nations declared copyright as a human right, like any other tangible property. Copyright is valuable property for the owner and deserves equal protection. There are lots of opportunities in the music industry for musicians, lawyers, accountants, and business managers separately. There is need to find synergy for all these in an equally beneficial manner for the music entrepreneurs. The purpose of this course is to bring everyone from these important fields to understand the business of music and how all these can be collectively utilized to form an important organogram in a music business organization. In so doing, we encourage the creation and preservation of our culture. We know that African music influences all genres of music wherever you go, from the Caribbean through to the mainlands. It is African music which influences how music is made everywhere in the world. I thank you. So I didn't check. Why was I still audible?
Yes. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much.
It's a
Thank you
pleasure.
so much. So we'll be taking questions now. If you have a question for our speaker today, can you kindly signify, use your emojis? First of all, let's give a round of applause for our speaker. That was amazing. That was amazing. Can you drop your reactions? Let's encourage him. If you have any question, you have any observation, you have any contribution, signify. Let's take your questions now. Can you all hear me? You can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question too. Okay, Vanessa, you can ask your question. I can see your hand. Your hand was raised. Okay, we'll take Vanessa's
Hi.
question first. Then we'll take Chris.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I had a couple questions. So something like music distributors, right? I wanted to ask how many distributors can you possibly have for one song or for one project, a music project? Does it exclusively have to be one, or is it something that you can have several distributors for the same song?
Okay. Um, Jotan, sir, please. Did you hear that? Did you hear a question? Is he still on the call?
Please unmute, Jotam. Unmute. You are muted.
Oh, sorry,
Thank
sorry.
you.
Okay.
I thought you had said you were gonna take two questions, but I will respond. That's why I wasn't responding. So Vanessa, you cannot use two different distributors for the same song. The reason being, when you are claiming for the song, you actually claim based on the unique code of that song, which is the ISRC or the ISWC for music or works. So if you give it to two different distributors, it will go into conflict. What you can do, you can use different distributors for different territories. So you can say, for Nigeria, I'm going to use this distributor. For Kenya, I'm going to be using this distributor. However, you have to be very big for them to accept that. In most cases, if you are still entering the music sector, they will only take exclusive rights. So that's my response to that case.
Thank
Wow.
you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you so much.
Um,
Um,
ma-
do you still have another question?
Yeah, I was going to ask another question about music catalogs. So we hear it randomly or once in a while about, like, let's say, musicians selling their catalog off to a certain company or something. So I wanted to ask why this happens, or what's the, I mean, obviously there is an economic, reasoning behind it, but what does this actually entail? What does this kind of transaction mean for the artist, for the music, for the people that bought the music? Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so in terms of selling the music catalog, like you said, it's mainly financial. The person would have looked at the valuation of their catalog and then they decide, okay, I will sell everything that I've done between 2010 and 2018, and I'm going to make these millions of man. I get this lump sum. But what it means is that you no longer own um, that catalog. So what it means is it depends on what you would have sold. In some cases, they will just sell this the sound recording side, the recording side of it, and remain with the publishing side, and therefore you can just collect the publishing rights. But others do sell the entire catalog. everything, all royalties from um, a sound recording side to publishing side. They sell everything and they lose it. Obviously, if you are if you are going to be selling your catalog, firstly you need to look at the benefit of selling that catalog. How much is this catalog getting you? What is the life of that catalog, which is obviously a risk because no one can just determine it clearly. And how much are you going to get at that time? Then you can make a decision as to whether or not you would like to sell your catalog. But it is advisable to keep your copyrights because what it means is that if you have sold that catalog, anybody who wants to do a cover of that song, they don't get the approval from you. They have to pay the person who have bought the catalog in order to do that. Anybody who would like to redo your song with a different sound, with a different beat, will now have to buy that from that other person. They no longer have to buy it from you. But obviously, you look at how much, whether you want to benefit now or you want to be able to continue to benefit from your creation.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. So, Chris, we'll be taking your question now. Your hand is raised. Can you
Okay.
mute
Yeah.
yourself? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, sir. My first question is, you spoke about the right platforms to upload songs. As an upcoming artist, what are the legal or right platforms that we can upload our songs if we want to? That is one. Secondly, what does VOD services? Can you explain more on that? Those are the two questions. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, VOD services, it's an acronym for video on demand services. For example, Netflix, Amazon, or Disney, Disney Plus. So those are video on demand services. And obviously, there's quite a lot of music that is used as background music in all the movies that they produce. So that's why we have an interest as the music industry in what they do. And then in terms of the right platforms, there is a whole list of them. There are so many. But I'll just list a few at the moment. And we call them legal platforms. We call them legal platforms if they are not breaking the law. And in copyright, they are breaking the law if they are not paying for a license. So those that do pay for a license are what we consider as legal platforms. And in most cases, if you are to put your music on these legal platforms, you have to go through an aggregator. You can't do it yourself. Where you find that you can just upload your music on your own, like on SoundCloud, then it means that that platform you will not see a cent from that platform. So how you determine these platforms is, in most cases, if you see a platform where you can just upload your music on your own from your phone, the requirements are very minimal, that platform is very suspicious. So you have to be very careful. On a legal platform, you have to go through a music content aggregator who will create an ISRC code for you, a request for all the metadata that is correct for you to be able to put on there. So that's how you determine. But just to give an example, you have got Facebook, TikTok, Spotify, Apple, YouTube Music. You have got Boomplay. Those are some of the legal platforms. And also obviously Netflix, Amazon, and Disney Plus that I mentioned earlier.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Omawumi, please, are you still on the call? You can ask your question now.
Hello, thank you very much.
Okay.
My question is that I want to ask about who music aggregators are. I hear it a lot in the industry, and you even mentioned it. The presenter mentioned it a lot. Who are they? Who are aggregators, and what do they do? That's my question.
Okay, music aggregators are organizations that help you to distribute your music on digital platforms. So they've got relationships with all the streaming services. as well as the telephone companies. So if you want to put your music on MTN, for example, for ringback tones, or on Airtel for ringback tones, you go through an aggregator. Then the aggregator will put that music on your behalf. Because, but otherwise, if it is big record labels, you find Sony owns the Orchard, which is an aggregator. So all Sony music is distributed through the Orchard, and then in fact, most of the big record labels, they've got their own aggregators in Africa. Warner Music is distributed through Africori, because Africori is now bought by Warner Music. So there are a whole lot of music aggregators that do aggregate on the digital platforms, and then you can get your payment. For the sound recording, you get your payment from the aggregator, and then for the publishing, you go either to your CMO or to your RME or to your publisher directly. I don't know if that clarifies to you what aggregators are.
Maumi.
Sorry, sir, I don't really understand what they do differently from distributors. As you have said that they collect music and they help you to distribute it. Are they any different from distributors, or they
Okay,
perform the same function?
so aggregators are actually distributors. Perhaps give me an example of a distributor, then I can be able to tell you whether or not you and I are agreeing, because aggregators are distributors. So who is a distributor in your mind? Give me a distributor who distributes on digital platforms.
1 RPM.
Sorry?
1 RPM, is that a distributor?
They're called
1
1 LPM. Okay, I have never heard of that. You have another one?
Yes. 1 RPM is also an aggregator. They are like DistroKid.
Okay.
You know, yes, they are like DistroKid. They are like Encore. You know, they are like Amuse. So they are all called distributors or aggregators. So what Jotam is saying, they are like the interface between you and the digital stores. You can't go to the digital stores directly, but the aggregators or the distributors in your own case will ensure that they get your music into those stores. Following from what our presenter has said, they will ask you for all the necessary information so that you are rightfully and correctly paid once your music start making money from the streaming stores. Do you get that now?
Yes, sir. Sorry, one more question, please, sir.
No,
Are
no,
they the same?
please.
Are they the same as
Maumi.
accelerators? It's just related, please. Are they also the same as accelerators? Because I hear these words a lot and it's confusing to me.
Are they the
Is
same
it
as
as
accelerators?
accelerators?
Perhaps
I hear
maybe.
accelerators too.
No. When you talk about accelerators or incubators, these are with respect to, are you talking with respect to distribution, or you are talking with respect to startups and investments?
With respect to music distribution, sir.
Accelerators, I don't really know how, I don't have an idea with respect to how accelerators affect music distribution. Jotam, do you have an idea?
No, I don't.
Omar, maybe we will check up this, or if you want to describe what you meant, maybe that could help us properly situate what the situation is. Have you dealt with any accelerator before?
No, I was in a meeting with some music executive, and then they were talking about how to distribute music. They mentioned all these words, and I was confused. I didn't even know what it meant. Accelerators, aggregators, all these words.
So I
The only
think
thing that I know about is distributors. I don't know what all the other words mean.
So I think from what Shinedu mentioned earlier, I think accelerators, they probably were talking about incubators, which is the
Yeah,
organizations
exactly.
that help you to set up your business, and they give you advice and all that, and they look after you until you get to a certain level in your music business. So perhaps that is what it was. But without the actual context of what the discussion really was, it will be very difficult to explain to you exactly what it is.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Please, we have a question in the chat by Emmanuel. So he's asking, how can an upcoming artist make money from streaming platforms? Then that is one of his questions. Then another one, if I upload my music on streaming platforms, do I have to pay them to promote my music on the platform? So sir, please can you
So how to make money um, of streaming platforms? If I upload my songs on Spotify now, do sorry, the question was, where is the question?
okay, it
Because
was
I'm
he
talking about,
sent it as a
is that
chat.
Emmanuel? Okay.
Is
If
that
I
Emmanuel?
upload my music on streaming platforms, do I have to pay them to promote my music? No, you don't. So usually what you do is, if you go with a DistroKit, for example, they will give you an option to either charge you, and then they collect everything and give that money to you directly, or what they do is they will just say, you give us your content, we put it on there, and we deduct a certain percentage, and then they give you the rest of the money. So you don't have to literally pay them, but you, again, it is through your distributor or aggregator, where that is where the agreement to pay for what they are doing happens. But you don't have to pay a streaming service for any of your song to appear um, on the streaming platforms. But I think the issue here, as a startup, this is where I was talking about, if you have the ability to market, because for every product, in music included, for it to then be able to be used by the people and to be streamed, you need to do the marketing. So you need to have the ability to market. If you don't, you need to engage with PR companies that can be able to push your music. You need to create relationships, just like you do with radio. So it is exactly the same thing that you do with the streaming services in order to push your music. You create those TikTok reels, you create all those YouTube shorts, all that, in order to market your music, create certain types of choreography which people can emulate. And then when I see it on YouTube shorts, I see it on the TikTok reels, and then I'll end up saying, oh, okay, I see everybody's playing to Nike. What do I do? Let me go to Spotify, and then suddenly, boom, Nike is now uh, on my playlist. That's how you get playlisted. So it's all about marketing. So you need to develop ways of marketing your music.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Wumi, your hand is still raised, but please can you allow others to ask questions? We'll attend to you later. We're taking a question from Gabriel. Gabriel, please can you turn your mic and
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jotam. I really appreciate the extent you've covered. But you mentioned something earlier as regards to South Africa, generating more income digitally compared to Nigeria. So I want to ask, what is South Africa doing right that Nigeria is not getting right? Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriel. That's a very difficult question because for me to be able to answer that, I need to have a deep understanding of what exactly is being done in Nigeria. That's probably what will allow me to do that. But just to give you a perspective, um, South Africa has had the big record labels for a very long time, and all the major publishers who have been there for a very long time. I know that in Nigeria, you now have Sony, and Universal is in the Ivory Coast to cover West Africa as well. and I think Warner is looking to come through as well. So the availability of those big companies has allowed the business to be more formalized, in that we also now have a lot of other record labels that are actually well established, but they are looking at how the big ones are established, and the musicians are forming their own record labels and then growing them into bigger and more competitive record labels, and they are able to then create those synergies. What I just know is that in most cases in Nigeria, the musician becomes big, they go overseas. So those are some of the things that then prevent the growth of the local industry, because Burna Boy's money is now recorded in England because he's signed up there. You have all the big artists that you can talk of. Most of them are not local. You even have Empire, which I actually look Empower Africa, which I actually look at as the probably the biggest and properly and truly African record company, but most of their rights are not collected locally as well. So all those things do contribute to how much you then collect as a country. Because when this money is recorded, they are looking at how much of this money, how much of this streaming did actually happen within Nigeria and within South Africa. So if the consumption is not local, or if the consumption is local, but the money never reaches the shores of Nigeria. For example, if um, an artist is controlled by Sony, for example, and Sony is licensing directly in Nigeria, unlike now where they have an office, but where they were licensing directly in Nigeria, that money was never recorded as Nigerian money. It is recorded wherever Sony is doing that processing and collecting that money. Unlike in South Africa, it's recorded there and everything is accounted for locally. The other thing is also the fact that, yes, Nigeria has got more streaming subscriber numbers in terms of streaming, but the Nigerian naira is weaker than the South African rand. And so when the streaming amount comes in naira, and then it gets converted into US dollars, which is the reporting currency for the IFPI, the amount of money that would have been collected will be much less. So those are some of the few reasons that I can give.
Thank you very much, sir.
Jotan, please, do you permit me to just add to what you have said? Let me, can you hear me, Gabriel?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Okay, what Jotam has said is, when he was talking about the exchange rates, you know that the naira has weakened over the last couple of months. The naira is exchanging at a point to $1 to 1,000 naira. I guess you are aware of that, and
True.
that is that's a key factor, you know. Then number two is, from his presentation, Jotan had actually mentioned some factors that needed to be considered. When you look at South Africa, for instance, I will just give you from the point of a collecting society. The money trickles down to the right holders, and it also forms part of the report, whether it's the IFPI report or the CSAC report. You take, for example, most of the broadcasting stations in Nigeria today are not paying for copyright royalties, whether for musical work, that's the song, or whether it's for sound recording, whether it's for neighboring right. They are not paying. In South Africa, the biggest broadcaster in South Africa, SABC, is paying. Our biggest government broadcaster is not paying. So where would the money come from to go to the right holders if the users are not paying. Number two, apart from the broadcasters, you have hundreds of thousands of hotels, pubs, clubs, event centers. A lot of these places are not paying for copyright royalty. Just a fragment of them are paying, So when this happens, the right holders suffer, the investors suffer, the labels suffer, the publishers suffer, the songwriters suffer. Nobody is paying, then nobody is earning. Then the structures that will enable the collection of these rights are really still evolving. South Africa has an established structure in terms of points of sources of collections. For us as in country, ours is still evolving. And yes, we have large population, but the South African country has a most settled, structured platforms that enables the collection of all of these monies. And he also said a lot of the performance could happen outside. The money don't come back here. They stayed in the countries where those performances took place. And sometimes when money is trying to come back, the exchange control and some restrictions makes it difficult for the money to actually come back home. So that's in addition to what Jotam has said, that could be some of the factors that is making South Africa richer in terms of the music business. So it's something that all hands needs to be on deck to participate in legislation, in making the right laws, in having the right lobby system to ensure that everyone within the value chain, contributes to making this happen so that right holders can actually get paid in the amount and in the value of their works. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. And also, just in addition, not only do they make it difficult to bring in the money, they also make it difficult for any investor who would have set up a record company in Nigeria to then be able to take out their profits. So if you are unable to take out your profits, you go to a country where you will be able to take that out. So those are some of the issues. And talking about what suffers, the other thing that suffers is also our culture, in that if there is no compensation for creative work, there is no need for one to be able to do creative work. People end up being other menial jobs, yet they were supposed to be creators and producing music. But at the end of the day, we all know that somebody would want to put food on the table. And if music can't put your food on the table, you find alternatives. And when that happens, our creative culture suffers.
Wow. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. We have two
Sorry,
more hands raised. Please, we'll
sorry.
just
Can
take.
I add?
We'll
Sorry.
take. Yes, Michael. Then we'll
Yes.
take Michael's question and Melissa, because it's almost
Sorry.
5.
Okay. Mine is not a question. Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael. I'll be contributing from what Joseph has just said. I'm speaking from the record label aspect. One of the major problems we have had is the fact that there's been proliferation of a lot of record labels for whatever reason, and that makes it difficult for us as an industry to have a coordinated system whereby we can actually get things done. So, for example, every artist now that maybe makes a hit goes and establishes his own record label, and you ask yourself, what is actually the need for that? And after this establishment, they still go out and take all the works and sign internationally. So the question would be, at the end of the day, what are you actually bringing back to the country? So that's one of the major problems from the record label perspective. We do not have a coordinated system. We have too much record labels that are very unnecessary and does not make any sense. South Africa is more coordinated. They have less record labels and they depend on the ones that already are existing, and they come together to help it grow. That's not the case in Nigeria. So until we also address that, we would also have issues. We'll continue to have issues like this, and South Africa will be better off.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Michael, for your contribution. So, Melissa, we'll take your question now so we can round up with today's class. It's almost 5.
All right, thanks once again for this opportunity. I've learned a lot from Kenya, and I've realized that has been the challenge in Kenya, because you find many public places are actually have cut a license with the Music Copyright Society of Kenya, but you find by the time it reaches the artists who are the right holders, there's nothing much they get. And then you find not many Kenyan artists have put their music on, have uploaded on the digital platforms. So I'm thinking the only way the revenue can increase is if maybe people like Spotify, they increase awareness and ensure they get as many subscribers as possible, and also let people know that their favorite artists are on Spotify. So it's all, again, I agree, it's all to do with marketing, ensuring that the subscribers will subscribe to these platforms if they know their favorite musicians have uploaded their music on these platforms. I think that's the only way money now will reach the artists or the right holders. It's ensuring that there's accessibility in terms of making sure that people are able to easily pay for the digital streaming platforms. Maybe they're easily able to pay for maybe a platform like Spotify easily. They don't have to use a credit card. Like in Kenya, we have something called M-Pesa. M-Pesa is really huge. So imagine if you're able to pay for your subscription every month through M-Pesa, that would increase the number of subscribers. So that's just my suggestion. Thank you.
So just to add on to Melissa's comment, you might find that Safaricom and other telcos might already have that agreement, because I know that in South Africa, people do subscribe through both MTN and Vodacom, apart from using credit cards. The credit card facility might be there, but there are people that are just uncomfortable using it. So telcos are doing that, but the disadvantage, and ideally, I would want a situation where the subscriptions are direct through the bank, and the government puts in place a proper environment for that to happen. Because when the subscription goes through a telco, the telcos also do get a lot of money out of it. And then the money that ends up reaching the creators of this content will be reduced. So it's just a matter of adding more and more middle people in there and different services and all that. But I agree with you. If people were to subscribe through M-Pesa, for example, they will end up having to. I will just check if it's not happening already in Kenya. But one other thing that I would also recommend is that as artists and artist managers, we need to find better ways, like Melissa mentioned, to really market our products and tell our fans where this music can be found.
All right. Thank you very much, sir, for this very insightful session. If you would kindly give us a closing remark so we can bring this meeting to an end, we would really appreciate that, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been a very great pleasure for me to be invited to this discussion. And I'm particularly excited about the excitement of everyone else in the discussions, the livelihood of the discussions. Shows a lot of interest in us trying to have our own solutions. My brother Chinedu will tell you that I have always wanted African solutions for Africans. We were together when we set up, he says Jotam set up the Capasso licensing app, but we did it together. It was him who was the first one to collaborate with me for us to be able to do it. So Yime and I have always had this in mind to say we need African solutions for Africans. If we didn't do it in 2017, probably digital licensing for Africa would be done elsewhere, even for people that are based here and who would like to be here, like Michael. So I would like to thank everyone for your contributions and to just let you know that in 2017, we never thought we would be where we are. And I know that with all this that we are doing and the enthusiasm that is coming up now on the continent, look at 5 years later, we are not even looking at 2030. We're looking at 27, 28. We will be somewhere and we will be in total control of our industry. We need, however, to be very shrewd in our business ethics, in that a lot of people are coming for Africa. Everybody is seeing growth in Africa. When you look at that report, if you look at the CISAC report, you look at the IFPI report, the markets are saturated elsewhere and the growth is in Africa. And the only way to grow the business will be coming to Africa. So we want them to come and find that we're already doing it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, sir. We really appreciate your presence. Really appreciate your taking your time to, speak to us today. We really, really appreciate. And we also thank CEO at Purple Blue Academy. Sir, we thank you for your presence too. And for everyone who has been consistent, from week 1, week 2, this is already week 3. We want to say a very big thank you. For those who are joining for the first time too, we want to say a very big thank you. We also would like to tell you ahead of time that next week is the last class for this masterclass. So also endeavor to be present, invite your friends, invite your colleagues. Let's make that particular session a very amazing and wonderful one. So thank you so much. We are bringing this particular session to an end. Thank you so much. Please don't forget to drop your feedback on the WhatsApp group so we can post. If you're not following us yet on our handles, please endeavor to do that. So thank you, everybody. Thank you and good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Jota. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.